Back in January, beginning of the new year, Justin Trudeau had announced he was going to resign as prime minister. At the end of December, your polling, just to remind everybody at home, had the Conservatives leading the Liberals by 26 points. Today, they're leading by 1%. Every time I look at the data or the charts on this, I just shake my head. Have you ever seen, Nick, a shift this quick, this dramatic?
No, we haven't seen something like this. It's very unusual. And, you know, Anne-Marie, it usually takes a number of things. It's never usually one thing that moves the numbers. It's a bunch of things. In this particular case, it was Justin Trudeau stepping down, Donald Trump and all the stuff that he said about tariffs, Canadian sovereignty, all that kind of stuff, and also the Liberals having their leadership at the same time. Roll up those three things, and what we took was what was once, why don't we call it the Justin Trudeau car crash, turning into a horse race between the Conservatives and the Liberals.
And this is where we sit this morning. So the Canadian elections, we know, are decided on which party wins the most ridings, not on the popular vote. So how is the regional breakdown of party support affecting the chances of who comes out as the winner in this race?
You know, Anne-Marie, the region to watch, or the province to watch, is actually Ontario. Not only does it have the largest swath of seats, but the thing is that in Ontario, the Conservatives still have about a 9 to 10 point advantage. This means that when we convert like the 35-34 into seat projections, this actually favors the Conservatives today because of the advantage that they have in Ontario. And I think this is probably one of the big game changers, because you remember, Anne-Marie, in the last two elections, it was tied for all intents and purposes on the popular support, but the Liberals were able to win more seats. It's not the case this time, the way the distribution of Conservative support is.
So let's talk a little bit more about that as well, because there also is this trend in the past where people in Ontario would vote one party provincially and another party federally, and they'd have this balance.
Yep.
So does that play into this election?
I think so. That's probably why Doug Ford accelerated the Ontario election. He probably thought, rightly so, last fall, that looked like the federal Conservatives going to win the election, and that, you know, this whole idea of Ontarian voters having one party in power at one level and the other one at the other wouldn't be good for him. He got ahead of that. And, you know, the thing is, you know, what we're seeing in Ontario, at least right now, is Doug Ford just came off a big win. Like, let's face it, he had a massive win. Yeah. And now those same voters, and they're not schizophrenic, those same voters weeks later are now looking at, you know, still looking at the Conservatives, but, you know, we may see the Liberals do well. You know, Toronto's going to be a key battleground, as in addition to some of the key seats in Ottawa, but, you know, Toronto's still up for grabs. The Liberals have to do better in Toronto if they want to be competitive and try to win more seats. You
know, we're talking about winning more seats. We know in Canada here that we don't choose a leader, we pick our local leaders, and then the most amount of seats wins, the party wins, and then that's who becomes the prime minister's leader. Your polling also shows a close race on who Canadians, though, prefer to be prime minister. I found these numbers interesting. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre right now is leading with 31.4%. Liberal leader Mark Carney is in second place, 30.7%. How important will support for party leader versus the party itself or the local candidates be in this campaign?
I think, Anne-Marie, this is really going to come to all the way down to leadership and the two front-running leaders, Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney. Because, you know, let's face it, we look at some of the big issues. Carney says he's not going to have a carbon tax. He's not going to have a capital gains tax. He's going to give HST kind of help for home buying. Very similar positions to Pierre Poilievre. Pierre Poilievre's even complaining they're stealing all his best ideas. Yeah. So if there's not a big difference on policies, then really what this election is probably going to boil down to is leadership. Who has the capability, who has the likability, who has the ability to deal with Donald Trump and kind of also to steer Canada's economy forward? So it's going to be day by day. It's going to be a massive pressure cooker for both Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre. Those two leaders are going to be testy because of the pressure that they're going to be under every day.
Listen, it's day one, so I'm going to ask you all the basic and the primer questions because it's good to get them out of the way. We've got some new ridings in this country, and we've changed up some of the borders. I live in one of these new ones. There's new candidates running. How does that favor one party or another?
Well, you know, the thing in this particular case is that we only have a handful of new ridings out here in this particular election. So it doesn't really favor any of the parties. The big thing is actually candidates. And I don't think, we talked about leadership. Candidates are probably going to make a difference because we might be in an election where people don't like the party that they're voting for. Maybe they don't like the leader that they're voting for. Candidates might make a difference, especially if it's a really tough race. So let's watch out for the quality of the candidates that the Conservatives and the Liberals put in the window, because Canadians will be looking at the leader, and then after that, if they're unsure, they might default to a strong local candidate, and this is where the local campaigns could matter.
Nik, is there anything that stands out in your polling that you've been doing today, maybe something that we haven't picked up on or talked about today that has piqued your interest that you're watching closely?
Yeah, it has to do with views on the economy. It's interesting, 7 out of every 10 Canadians in a survey that we just released a couple days ago believe that the next generation will have a lower standard of living. 7 out of every 10. That's a lot. It's even higher among young Canadians. They're even more pessimistic about the future, which means when they're watching the news and listening to the federal party leaders, they're thinking about themselves and their kids and their grandkids, wondering, what kind of economy are we going to have? So it's going to take more than what I'll say cheap shots and negative attack ads from both of the two main contenders. They're going to need to put forth some type of vision so at least Canadians think someone has a plan for the future, and that future provides a little bit of hope.
Nik Nanos, always great to speak to you. Glad to have you back here on this day for campaigning. Thanks so much for being here.
Bye-bye.